Pick Computer Science, video number 8, looking at RAM and ROM. RAM and ROM are types of primary memory. If we think about ROM, read-only memory, we don't want to be thinking about anywhere that stores our BIOS, and things like EEPROM and flash ROM are, not strictly speaking, read-only. We would probably say that CMOS isn't read-only either, because it updates the computer's time on a little battery like that in the motherboard. And we wouldn't say that a CD-ROM, although once written to is read-only, we wouldn't say that's part of our definition of ROM. We need to think very carefully about what the exam board expects us to know about ROM. Wikipedia's entry on read-only memory is a good place where it discusses how most things that we refer to as ROM aren't, strictly speaking, read-only. ROM commonly refers to memory that is read-only in normal operation, whilst reserving the fact of some possible way to change it. Well, the exam board aren't too interested in that. Key things that you need to know about ROM for an exam are that it is read-only memory, and that the contents of the memory are not erased when the power of the computer is off. Therefore, we know it as non-volatile. It stores our boot program. We've learned in a previous video that might not be strictly true, but it needs to store something in order to get our computer booted up. There needs to be something stored on the computer that is read-only, that is non-volatile, that points towards our BIOS and our power on self-test, and that the exam board refer to as the boot program. So all these bullet points are things you need to remember about ROM for your exam. The exam board might also expect you to know that ROM is now where some companies will put operating systems onto. These would be small operating systems, not the types of operating systems like Windows or Android that we're used to using. They're operating systems that don't need to be changed in any way, or can't be changed maliciously by either mischievous employees or people that just like to mess around with settings or change something by accident. The sorts of operating system that are put onto ROM chips, something that is read-only, are ones where it saves time for them to be loaded into any RAM. The operating system wouldn't need to be loaded into RAM like a Windows operating system would. It would just boot straight up, quick as a flash. Therefore, it might be good for things that are safety critical, maybe things that are involved in emergencies. If we think about an operating system that needs to handle air conditioning, that might be a simple enough operating system to be stored on ROM and something that can boot up very quickly. Maybe something along the lines of something inside a games console, a games console's operating system that can't be updated, that would be stored possibly on some ROM. And the sort of software that controls safety critical systems like traffic lights would be stored on read-only memory, where a program that manages a traffic system never needs to change. RAM stands for random access memory. Might look a bit like this, and there it is on the right hand side, actually installed within a motherboard, and takes its place in the boot process during post, where the existence of RAM within a computer system is checked for, and then carries out an important job after the MBR is found, loading up the operating system kernel, and all the files that provide Microsoft Windows for us are loaded up into RAM. And as well as an operating system being something that needs to be stored in RAM, any applications and programs that we use on our computer are temporarily stored in RAM whilst we use them, as per this screenshot. Now, any of these programs, such as Microsoft Word there and the file that's loaded up in there, any of these programs would not be instantly open again if we lost power to the computer. So, for example, if we pulled the power out the back of it, or if we hard booted it, so held down the power button until the computer loses power, when we were to switch it back on, we just get our Windows desktop. We wouldn't have all of our programs that were loaded up into RAM instantly available again. We'd have to go and hunt them down and load them up again. And any data that was inside a file that we hadn't saved to secondary storage, such as a hard disk, would be lost. So therefore, we know RAM as being random access memory, of which the contents of the memory are erased when the power is off. Therefore, it is volatile. It stores our operating system, any applications we might have open, any user files which are open within those applications, and those are some of the key things you need to know about RAM ready for your exam. Other key things that you need to know about RAM and ROM for your exam could include, well, you could be asked which types of software can be stored in both, and we know that in RAM it stores our operating system, application, user files, and that ROM stores our boot file. You could be asked about differences other than volatility, remembering that RAM is volatile and ROM is non-volatile. It could be to do with storage space. ROM will always be smaller than RAM. We will always have more gigabytes of RAM available than we do of ROM. Incidentally, why is RAM called RAM? Well, it's not because when we have something loaded up into RAM, it is loaded into a random location on that memory chip. It's more to do with the fact that we don't have to search every individual location on that memory chip to find what we're looking for. We can just go straight to it. So if we took the analogy of a tower block and we know that our friend lives up here in this particular flat, we don't have to visit every flat in the tower block to go and see him. We can just go straight to his or her flat up at the top there without visiting every other flat. So it's nothing really to do with randomness. It just means that we don't have to do things in the strict order of checking everywhere first. We can go straight to somewhere. If you wanted to do some further reading on RAM, then you could always look into the different types of RAM that there are. There are many different sizes and models of RAM, so you could look those up. But otherwise, bye for now, and I'll see you in the next video.